Years ago, I appeared over on the Spike Feeders playing a whole bunch of my decks, with me personally piloting Rionya Fire Dancer, and since then I still get asked if I've updated the deck over the years, and I can safely say yes, and here it is. I love clones, red clones especially, and Rionya is my favorite of them. Jaxus and Delina can all take a backseat to my girl, mainly because Rionya is about volume, quantity over quality in some cases. She is a 5-mana human wizard, but should be a bard by today's standards, and is a 3/4. She reads, at the beginning of combat on your turn, create X tokens that are copies of another target creature you control, where X is 1 plus the number of instant and sorcery spells you've cast this turn. They gain haste. Exile them at the beginning of the next end step. In case you haven't read that massive text box before, understand this first. Rionya always makes 1 clone at the start of combat. The important distinction being X is 1 plus. So, unlike a Delina who needs to attack to make a clone, Rionya just gives you a freebie. Even if she's removed on the next turn and you've cast nothing else, you get a clone at the beginning of combat. Bingo, easy as that. That's value at 5 mana before you do anything at all. But if you start building in a spell slinging element into the deck, you start getting crazy. 3, 4, or 5 plus clones at a time are entirely possible, but you need, like in all things, balance to make that happen. You need mana to get everything running, cards to ensure you always have resources, spells to up the number of clones you get, and creatures to make copies of. But if you can strike that balance, you can easily pop off out of nowhere and win a game. Before we look at how, make sure to slam that like button, comment on your favorite part of this brew, and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, let's tackle a problem this deck has: mana. You want one really big turn to pop off and make enough clones out of something to just win the game, and this deck is all about setting the table ahead of that happening. And while Mana Rocks and Ruby Medallion certainly help, they don't feed Rionya's clones. That's where we really want to rely on rituals. My previous brew had Dockside Extortionist as a cornerstone, with Rionya making just 1 free copy, solving your mana problems for the rest of the game. But with Dockside getting 86'd, we can rely on rituals to get our spell slinging mana and add to Rionya's spell count. Rite of Flame, Jeska's Will, and Mana Geyser are all sorcery speed rituals that generate us more mana than we spend to cast them. Excellent options that, if successfully cast, usually lead to winning the game. But instant speed rituals like Desperate Ritual, Pyretic Ritual, and Seething Song also end up paying for themselves and giving us mana to cast something else. I like to say that Strike It Rich is a ritual too, just on layaway. Flashback means it makes the cut, since it gives us something to do later in the game while we're setting up or looking to pop off again. Some creatures help with our mana problems as well, like Treasonous Ogre. Make sure you can win though, because no one wants to pump all of their life into mana just to get shut down before popping off. Atsushi is a ritual too, kind of. Each clone we make of the legendary Atsushi instantly dies to the legend ruled and nets us 3 treasures or extra cards. If you can't pop off but can keep Rionya around, it's a good way to bank up. Creatures that make treasures, like a Professional Facebreaker, Stormkiln Artist, or the new Goldlust Triad, are also fantastic additions to the deck. As singles or in multiples, they let you save and save until the turn you want to pop off and win with multiple spells. Free spells that you don't pay mana for help a lot here too, as paying 5 mana for Rionya, then casting 2 to 3 free spells can achieve the same impact. Gutshot, Lava Darts Flashback, and Mog Salvage are all completely free spells that net you a clone after dumping your mana into just casting Rionya. As long as you have a good creature on board, this can, on its own, do the job. But cards like Invoke Calamity, Finale of Promise, and Mizzix's Mastery help here too. A single spell cast that lets you cast multiple other spells for free is unbelievably good. And don't get me started on Arcane Bombardment. If your opponents are foolish enough to let you keep this on the battlefield, then you've won the game, as each spell cast can net you 3 to 4 other free spells cast on any and every turn. This is worth the include on the off chance that you can stick it in play and just win the game. Sometimes though, you don't even need that many spells cast to help you get multiple clones. Harmonic Prodigy and Roaming Throne both double up on Rionia's triggers, getting you more and more from each spell cast. One spell cast turns into 4 clones with just one of these doublers out. The new redoubled Stormsinger basically acts this way too, as on attack it makes you another copy, tapped and attacking, of every token you had enter this turn, doubling your clones. If you made those clones of the Stormsinger, and then attack with those Stormsinger clones, well, that ends up being a lot of tokens. But if you cast a clone spell like Twin Flame, Electro Duplicate, or Molten Duplication in order to duplicate a Prodigy, Stormsinger, or Throne, well, then you start getting silly. I've said it before, but if you can double a doubling effect, you basically instant win in any case in any deck. If you can't pop off right away, or you have failed to pop off in an attempt, don't worry, not all is lost. Cards like Past in Flames and the new Will of the Jeskai can also give everything in your graveyard flashback, meaning you've got a second or even third chance to finish opponents off. And since Rionya triggers at the beginning of combat, if you can get more combats with a Fury of the Horde, also cast for free, or a Seize the Day, you can get Rionya's clone triggers over and over again. And here's where we get into the combo with Rionya: extra combats. Let's bring out the chalkboard! Hello, old friend. Let's demonstrate Rionya's 1.5 card infinite combo. Our commander here interacts in a funny way with extra combats. Since she triggers at the beginning of combat, getting an extra combat off of a creature means we can loop into infinite combats. Combat Celebrant, Portraiser, and Bloodthirster are our 3 potential targets here. Let's tackle them one by one. Combat Celebrant gets exhausted on attack, meaning it doesn't untap during your next untap step to get you another combat. But that doesn't mean that 2 attacking Combat Celebrants can't untap each other. Just 1 extra copy of the Combat Celebrant and you've got a recipe for infinite combats, provided you have 1 surviving Celebrant each new combat. Even if the Celebrants can't successfully reach your opponent's life totals right away, they will eventually. After all, you have infinite time, your opponents do not. Portraiser and Bloodthirster are very similar in that they get you an extra combat on combat damage to an opponent, with the caveat that you can't attack the same opponent twice. With that copy, at least. Bloodthirster's big upside is that it has Flample, meaning you can connect for combat damage much easier. Portraiser you have to work a little bit harder for, but provided it can connect with even a single opponent, you're in game over territory. Each successive version of these creatures can attack the same opponent again, getting you a new combat, and you just rotate the attack targets of each copy of them until they can no longer attack anybody, and you have a fresh supply of them, while your opponents have fewer and fewer creatures and less life. Game over, man. But that's not all in infinite combo land for Rionya. This deck contains multitudes. See, a Mana Geyser or a Jeska's Will with an opponent on 6 or more cards in hand can get you infinite spell count with a Reiterate, a spell copier with buyback. You'll need a boatload of mana to kick this off, 11 with Geyser and 9 with Jeska's Will, but once you do, you can copy your ritual, buy back the Reiterate, then copy the ritual again. Even if you don't net any mana from the loop, you get infinite spellcasts and infinite copies of a creature once you move to combat with Rionya's ability. You could make infinite copies of an Iron Mirror and win the game. The creature you're copying is no longer relevant as long as it has at least 1 power. Contained within my list is also the classic dual caster mage combo with any clone spell. All you have to do is cast a clone spell like a Heat Shimmer, Twin Flame, or Molten Duplication, targeting a legal creature. Hold priority and flash in a dual caster mage. The mage then copies the clone spell and targets itself, now in play, making a copy of itself, copying the original clone spell, to repeat the loop and give you infinite, hasty dual caster mages. Then crush your opponents under the tide of infinite nerds. But while I have the chalkboard out, I want to make sure to cover the honest way of winning, with damage. The deck is packed with creatures that deal damage on enters like Fanatic of Mogus, Sunspire Lynx, Tectonic Giant, Fear of Burning Alive, and Red Dragon. These all deal between 3 and a lot of damage on enters and makes for amazing clone targets. Each copy you get has its enter's ability, meaning you really don't even have to attack to end the game. These ones make you work harder for the win though, as you really need to cast multiple spells to finish off the entire table. If a creature deals 3 damage on enters, you need to make 13 copies of it to take an opponent from 40 life down to 1 life. And while that's possible, it's not easy to do and is definitely a lot of work. If a creature deals 4 damage on enters, you need 10 copies of it to take an opponent from 40 to 0. And while that seems just as unreasonable as 13 copies, it's actually a lot less work. A creature dealing 5 damage on enters starts to look at just 8 copies, but it's when we start dealing 6 or more damage at a time that things look actually much more reasonable. Making your ideal copy targets a Fanatic of Mogis or a Sunspire Lynx depending on the pod. These are the targets you want to prioritize copying, as dealing 8 damage on enters and making 5 copies of it is a game ender. Remember that this is without potential combat damage too, meaning that number can be much more forgiving depending on the board state and existing life totals of your opponents. This means Rionya can be a game ender fast. And because of these elements, including the infinite/game ending combos, this deck is a bracket 4 deck despite its only game changer being a Jeska's Will. It could definitely be updated to include an Ancient Tomb too, but the deck functions just fine without it. But let me know in the comments, have you squared off against the Rionya deck before? How did it fare? Share your lists in the comments, and be sure to let me know what you thought of this month's look back at classic Commander Mechanic Brews 2. You can find this deck and all of my decks linked in the description at my sponsor, MOXFIELD. MOXFIELD is the best deck building platform in the world and makes it easy to build decks to specific brackets thanks to their built-in automated bracket detection tools. Never misjudge your decks again, and be sure to follow my profile to never miss any of my brews. If you want to pick up any of the cards for this list, be sure to go to Card Trader. Use my promo code MECHANIC now for 5% off your orders from any TCG. Card Trader's zero system means you can get cards from all over the world with only 1 shipping fee. Save money and time today. And if you want to sell off your cards, whether they be unused or just duplicates, go to Card Conduit. If you're selling out of anything from Pokemon to Star Wars to Magic, get premium rates for your cards. Ship them unsorted today and get a check in the mail. If you were inspired to brew, you have to hit that subscribe button. Be a gem and check out some of the other videos on the channel right now too. And as always, good luck and have fun!